Motivation 2.0 and 3.0 are different ways to describe an approach to motivation. And I like to use the metaphor of the computer operating system. The computer operating system is a set of software and instructions that run beneath the programs. It's a set of assumptions and protocols that allow what's on the surface to actually operate. And I think that societies have that too. I think that running beneath our economic transactions, our social relations, is an operating system of sorts. A set of assumptions and implicit rules, most of which have to do with behavior. And Motivation 2.0 is an operating system where the central assumption was that people are responsive to carrots and sticks. You reward behavior, you get more of it. You punish behavior, you get less of it. And that actually worked as an operating system when people were doing relatively simple, straightforward work. Turning the same screw on an assembly line, or adding up columns of figures in a white-collar office. The problem is that that approach to motivation doesn't work for the more sophisticated, complex, creative things that people are doing today. And what happens when when any kind of operating system can't support the programs it's running? It crashes. And I think that's what we're having. We're having a series of crashes because we're using the wrong operating system, and we need to upgrade to Motivation 3.0, which is an operating system built not on this reward and punishment drive, but on our inner drive to direct our own lives, contribute to the world, and get better at things that matter. I think that these principles apply to motivating student performance and satisfaction. I mean, these principles of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, this idea that we have these other drives that lead to effectiveness and high performance, is a fact of life for humans, whether they're humans who are 46 or 16. And so I think in some ways we've sold our students short and essentially treated them like these endlessly manipulable robots. And if we just press the right levers in the right way, they'll do what we want them to do and what we expect them to do. And I think any good teacher, any good parent knows that that's often not true. But I think even worse is that when it does work, what it does is it teaches kids compliance. It teaches them to be compliant. And I think that's a very dangerous attitude for life satisfaction, but also for performance on creative tasks. What we really want are people to be engaged. And the way that people are engaged is if they have a sense of autonomy, if they're able to get better at stuff that's significant and meaningful, and if they can contribute to the world. I think that community engagement can be hugely important in building student engagement. I think that's one of the great things that the Patterson Foundation is doing. That is, kids want to deal with real life issues. They want to see the world as it actually works. They want to be integrated into the rest of life, not in these hermetically sealed little universes called schools. And the more we break down the barriers between school and the rest of the world, the more I think it enriches the rest of the world, and it's actually effective for kids. And that's everything from taking on projects that are solving real problems in their community rather than these sort of make-work, hermetically sealed projects that they have in classrooms. But it could also be things like, your museums and cultural institutions are part of your community. They should be part of your education. And that there's this kind of dual enrichment that goes on when you have students go to, say, a cultural institution, and when cultural institutions receive these young minds. I mean, it's enriching for everybody. And this idea that school is the only repository for where students can learn is crazy. That's not how these students live. They're learning all the time. Human beings learn all the time. And the more we break down these barriers, as the Patterson Foundation is doing, and connect to the rest of the community, I think everybody benefits from it. Against my better judgment, I put my email address on the cover of every book, and as a result, I get a lot of feedback from readers. And the feedback I've gotten from Drive on students is hey, this is really interesting. I kind of sort of knew that the way my mom and dad were doing things was pretty messed up. I kind of sort of knew that my school wasn't doing things properly. I had an intuitive sense, and you've helped me put language on it. And that's great kind of feedback. But I do think there is this, I think in many cases we've sold a lot of these students short. They want to do good work. They want to contribute. They want to learn. The problem is that we're putting them in systems that thwart a lot of those inner desires. So what does that mean? That means that what they do is that they're compliant. In school, they either compliant or non-compliant. That is, there are two different ways that there are two different ways you can respond to control if someone's trying to control you. And I do think that schools can be very controlling. You can either comply or you can defy. But neither one of those is engagement. So these young people are engaging in other areas of their life. They're engaging in the sports field. They're engaging in arts programs, choir, theatrical arts. They're engaging in church groups. They're engaging in technology and making videos and music and distributing them around the world. And I think what we really need to do is, make the school environment as engaging as the rest of these kids' environments. What really interests me about what Patterson is doing is that I think it's at the forefront of a very different approach to education. It's an approach to education that doesn't see school and learning as separate from the community, as separate from the experience of life, but as integral to that life and as connected to other parts of our community and other parts of our lives. I think one of the problems that we have is that when we give kids problems to solve in school, we usually give them problems that are, in a single discipline, perfectly defined and have one right answer. But those aren't real problems. No one gets a problem. I've never had a problem. I haven't had a problem like that in 35 years. The problems that you get, they don't come to you as math problems or science problems. They come to you as just big honking problems, usually poorly defined, usually with multiple possible answers. But those are interesting problems, and the more that young people can see those kinds of interesting problems and see what professionals in other fields are doing, the more I think that they'll say, wow, that's actually really challenging. That's so much more interesting than in this kind of carefully packaged problem that I'm getting in school. By connecting with either whether it's the cultural institutions or community groups, they can say, whoa, there's some interesting issues out there, and these are the things that I really like to grapple with. Not in spite of their being challenging, but because they're challenging and much more challenging and complex than what I'm getting in school. I think Sarasota, in large part because of the Patterson Foundation, is doing an incredible job of linking schools with the rest of the community. And I think that should probably be intensified. And how do you do that? I think it's worth bringing people in. I think what would be interesting, let me give you a concrete idea here. For instance, young people are looking for relevance. And so why not have a science class or a math class where you bring somebody in from a local company and say, hey, this is how algebra or trigonometry or something apply to what I'm doing here. I'm making hydraulic parts, and I've got this company that makes hydraulic parts. And actually to do this, you actually have to know something about algebra. You actually have to know something about physics. And I think bringing community members in. I think that for the kids who are more artistically inclined, having artists and musicians come into the school and say, hey, I've made a life out of being an artist or a musician. It isn't simply this frivolous thing that you do. It's not only a side project, that you can actually lead a healthy, successful life doing these kinds of things. And so it's really, I think this integration of the school and the rest of the community, it strikes me as a no-brainer. It strikes me as so valuable for the students, but also valuable for the community. And I also think it gives people in the community a better sense of what's going on in schools. There are a lot of people who are voting on tax levies, who are voting for legislators, who are making education policy, who haven't been in a classroom for 30 years. And I think that limits our ability to make good education policy. And the more we bring people in from the community to see what's going on in our schools, to visit our classrooms, the more I think they'll come away with a sense of the heroism that teachers are displaying, and also get a sense of what school is really like today, and when we'll resist some of these simple-minded solutions that we're often peddling. I think we can tap into this sense of student engagement in a number of ways, but I think one of the most important things is simply to ask students the questions. How about convening a meeting with policymakers of students, and the students say, what are some things we can do to make this school and this education experience better? No one ever asks students those questions. We ask the experts, we ask the parents, we ask the teachers, but we don't bring students into the conversation. So, as a writer, my favorite methodology is asking people. So let's just, let's literally ask students, what do you want to see? What kinds of improvements do you want to see in your school? Why not convene meetings at schools and sit down at lunch with 12 students and hear about their experience? Why not invite students to make video. I mean, I like the idea of have students make a video, a 2-minute video about here's one way to improve the schools in this area. Here's one way to improve my classroom. I think students would really gravitate to that. The problem is that no one is asking them. And again, I think you guys are making strides in some very powerful ways in drawing these connections between the students' experience and the wider world. But I think that the students at some level need an invitation to participate. They need to be asked their opinion. If you ask students their opinion, they will give you their opinion. If you ask them for ideas, they will give you some ideas. And some of those ideas are going to be really, really good.